All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome. It's my great honour to introduce you tonight to Cate Kennedy, who's the author of the acclaimed novel The World Beneath and the short fiction collections Dark Roots and Like a House on Fire. She's edited several anthologies, written a travel memoir, Sing and Don't Cry, and the poetry collections Joy Flight, Signs of Other Fires, Crucible and Other Poems, and The Taste of River Water. She's won the Age Short Story Award, the Vincent Buckley Poetry Prize, Victorian Premier's Literary Award, and the Steel Run Award, among many others. And she's been shortlisted countless times. But it all began way back in 1994 when she won the first of her two Scarlet Stiletto Awards. Welcome, Cate.
Ahoy, Kelly. How are you?
I'm good. How are you going?
Oh, I feel it's lovely to hear that kind of string of accolades and know that it actually was all thanks to Scarlet Stiletto.
You reckon?
Well, funnily enough, I was over at my old house in Dalesford, and I was in the very room where I kind of wrote those stories. And I was putting down a new floor and trying to kind of fix up that. It's always falling over, that house. But I was in that room just thinking, I remember staring out that window, and here I am again about to talk to you tonight, and just thinking, it's so strange how that sense of place and where we are and how we kind of muster our thoughts and where those things happen. I think it seems a long while ago now, 1994, but today I was remembering it really clearly, yeah.
Though, of course, we don't look a day older.
I look better.
So tell us about that. Tell us about that first year and the story, or I understand stories that you wrote for that first competition.
Yeah, well, I had moved to Dalesford and I was working as the librarian in town, which was a lot of reading. I'm a very big reader, as I'm sure everyone else is too, and that felt like the ideal job to me. Only bettered by when I got sort of headhunted to go and work at the secondhand bookshop down by the lake. So I was just like happy as Larry. And I would just sit there and I would read everything that I love to read, which basically is this sort of, what it's like, this voracious feast of new stuff would come in, and I'd be looking at who was writing what. And I loved reading short fiction and I loved reading crime. Lots of my borrowers also loved crime. There was large print crime, large print romance, large print westerns. That was a big amount of my work for all of my borrowers, but I'd read everything I could. And then a day came, I have to say, when I was reading a collection and I felt this weird, vague kind of itch. I hadn't written anything for ages. When I was a younger person, I'd actually been to university to study professional writing and editing. And I just thought journalism wasn't really for me. It was the beginning of the 80s and I did media and communications and I got interested in lots of different things. And I'd sort of stopped writing after uni. But I must admit, I was sitting in the library and I had this rather, I'm ashamed to admit, the thought was, I think I could do that as well as that. Do you know what I mean? I should give this another go after 15 years of not doing anything, just reading, not writing. And there just so happened to be on the desk of the library some pamphlets that were from Sisters in Crime, inviting women authors to write a short story for their new competition called the Scarlet Stiletto. And it was due in about 5 or 6 days. And I thought, okay then, Smarty, if you think you're so, give it a go. So I gave myself the weekend. You know how you think, I'll knock that over? It's like,
how hard can it be?
How hard can it be? It's only 3,000 words. And of course, the beautiful thing about short fiction is part of the skill of it and the reason I love it as a form is part of it is making it seem as effortless as that. So that when someone reads it, the experience is just as, it feels like it just comes out of the air at you, And you want to have that effortless feeling, but of course the process, as anyone knows, is not that effortless. And so I spent the weekend writing and I couldn't believe how hard it was. So I wrote a big sort of complicated plot and I plotted through that story. And man, it was like going to the dentist, It felt like I was just doing this laborious dot to dot. And I was so pleased on Sunday afternoon when I finished that first story that because it was only 5 o'clock and I still had lots of ideas, I dashed off another one just to kind of remind myself of the fun of it. You know what I mean? And
So the second one was more fun to write. You weren't.
It was, and it only
doing
took a little while because all of that hard yards and getting the stitch and that had all happened in the first one. So I entered both of the stories, and I have to tell you, it was the one that I kind of had more fun writing that won the prize. So it really was a great lesson for me I always think to myself, if it's onerous to write, it's probably going to be fairly onerous to read, and vice versa. If you've had a good time, it's like acting. People say if you go on stage, if you have a good time, they'll have a good time. If you're nervous and anxious, they'll feel nervous and anxious. And I do think there's a beautiful thing happening between a writer and a reader where voice and subtext and our beautiful conversation we're having about something which is not voiced in the story. I think, a crime story has so much in it which is subtextual because we understand the genre. We know what we want. We love it. So give the reader the thing that is part of that conversation. So it was a great experience and I loved doing it so much. And then I met all the sisters and it was like a shot in the arm to think, oh, here's a whole tribe of people. I don't have to sit in my small library in a country town feeling like I'm the only person in the world. I actually have all these other people who I can talk with and communicate with who are reading and writing and who love that genre. So that was way back then. And the big change for me, Kelly, is since that time, my goodness, female crime writing has just burgeoned into something completely different and huge. And now women are the ones who are really kicking the goals now,
So what did that mean for you and your writing career, winning that first Scarlet Stiletto Award? And in fact, the second Scarlet Stiletto Award.
I think two things it's a fusion that has to happen, I think, with writing. And one thing is the vision. One thing is all the ideas that you have. But the other thing is the execution. Do you know what I mean? To know how to do something so that you get that little shot of surprise and pleasure to have made something. And I think, in my experience, people's ideas for stories and their visions are usually fantastic. What we tend to fall down in and disappoint ourselves with is the execution. So the making of something and learning, wanting to be better at knowing how to do it. And so you see it as a kind of a craft and you want to make it as good as you can make it. That's what it really taught me. And I think crime writing particularly, it's such a wonderful thing to kind of cut your teeth on and understand how it works. It works through all sorts of expectations. It works through having cause and effect in it. It works through setting up and paying off. It's satisfying to make that small little universe and make it feel real. And I don't want to be boring. You don't have to be boring because something has to happen in a crime story. And also I like the fact that usually you have a narrator or a character, a protagonist, who for all kinds of reasons is already an interesting person because that investigator or curious person or narrative viewpoint character, something bad's happened and they want to put things to rights somehow. Do you know what I mean? And I find myself thinking, even that in itself is fairly heroic in this chaotic world, isn't it? That you think there's something's out of whack and I need to dig here to get the truth. I'm pretty happy with that person as an avatar character who I love reading about and I also love inventing,
So can I just dig in then a little bit to the idea of the short story rather than the long form, and what you think makes for a cracking short crime story? Like, do you start with, you talked a little bit about it then, but do you start with structure, or is it the idea of the crime, or is it character or plot?
Yeah, I tend to think, I look at my first story that first weekend as one that was really caught up with structure and genre and plot, and I wanted to make that plot watertight. But the second story to me was all about if you invent a character that wants something and can't get it, and make them go out and try and get something. And in a crime story, of course, that thing is just the truth. That's enough resistance, isn't it? That you want the truth and you can't get it. You want to find out what's happened. You want to, kind of, put things to rights is a good way of looking at it. You want things that have been disrupted to be fixed up. I think structure finds itself, I've found, and I think plot kind of finds itself. I don't think we're interested, well, I'm not interested very much in plot if there's not a character that I kind of care about, and I'm interested, and who seems real. And I love that being in somebody else's head. That's the real power of fiction to me. It's not so much that I understand all the geeky stuff about submarines, or that I'm now imagining that I'm in World War II or something. To me, it is being in the head of another person. And that's great to read. I love reading when that happens, but it's a great thing to try and practice as a writer, to put the reader in the head of someone who perhaps they don't have anything in common with, who is not them, and maybe not even that likable, or maybe even not that heroic, but there's someone who's not you, and you get to see what it's like to be in their skin for a little while. And to me, I think in a short story, that's a deep dive. We're straight in, and the voice is there saying, let's go, come on, I want to show you something important. And there's not a minute to waste. So you can't have any flat spots. You've only got this much time to open that world, that door of that world, and the reader peeks in and they want to be there. They don't want to be on the tram or sitting up in bed or sitting in the sunshine in their chair. For a little while, they're in your world and you're controlling their perceptions. That to me is just such a beautiful thing. All I can compare it with is when I talk to people who are musicians, who say, when I'm playing, you're in my space. You're choosing this over what's outside the club. You want to be in here. And I feel like that's the case with short stories too. I'm going to conjure something and render it in such a way that you want to be in this world for a little while. You don't want it to end. That's a great kind of, thing to be striving for.
Isn't it? And I'm conscious that this year people are going to be writing these stories in this world.
Yes.
In these strange, troubled times, isolated perhaps, and with everything going on, and that act of conjuring is possibly even more important than ever before. So can you just give us one tip for those people who are thinking about planning their stories now, or maybe thinking, I'll just sit down at the last moment. If it's good enough for Cate Kennedy, it's good enough for me. I'll wait till deadline, I'll do it then. Whatever your thought process is, you have one tip for those people, what would it be?
Okay. My tip is crunch time and crunch space. Don't try and write about everything you feel about the human condition. Don't try and make your time frame enormous and ambitious. Make something small and specific. Make something that's so specific, in fact, that the reader can experience it on a sensory level. And the smaller it is, it's just so strange to think this, because we think we have a vast palette. We think the creative mind loves to be unfettered, but in fact, no. We love constraint. We love parameters, because now we can fully explore that small little world. So I think have your antenna out for those small things that jag your attention, whether they're out in that world, whether they're something that's coming to you that you're browsing on the web. Keep your antenna tuned to the thing that actually makes you go, hang on a sec, because you can guarantee that if you get your attention snagged by something, that is going to arrest somebody else. So the arresting of something, isn't it great when someone says, this is a really arresting story? What that means is you have stopped someone and you've arrested their attention. So if it happens to you, I find the little thing works every time. For me, small and specific always wins over big and generic. It doesn't matter how small it is. That's what's going to work in the story.
And bring us straight into it.
Yes.
So that's the arresting part. I always like that idea of it's just like you've walked into someone's kitchen into the middle of a conversation.
Exactly.
And there you are.
Be there.
And you don't know what happened before. What happened before doesn't matter.
That's right. It's this moment now, And I think of that idea of, in a short story, it's the straw that breaks the camel's back sometimes. But we understand that this is the end of a million straws, and we're privileged to kind of see it enacted in front of us. This is the moment when everything's going to shift and pivot, and we can't get enough of that. We want to see that moment where things take a change and take a turn, because that transformation, we're reading for that. That's what it's all about. So whether it's crime or whether it's something bigger, we are following for that transformation all the time. So I just want to just write, and you'll learn how to do it, you know.
Fantastic. Cate Kennedy, thank you so much.
Oh, thanks, Kelly. Have a great night, and keep at it.
Yeah. Good luck, everybody, with your Scarlet Stilettos entries. For details, you can look on the website, which is sistersincrime.org.au, and I understand that entries have to be in by the 31st of August. So get writing. Don't really leave it till the last minute like Cate Kennedy.
Don't recommend that.
Whip up another one at the end if you want to, but, you know, don't rely on that happening. Thank you, Kate.
Thanks, Kelly. Have a great night. See you.
You too.